So the customer's journey,
Wow,
and
that's super
they
meta.
tell this they tell this whole storyline about the customer's journey, and then they end up making that customer like the hero of the story, which is why it's the hero workshop.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On today's episode, I have with me Zachary McClernon, who is the Director of Alliances and Business Development at FusionSpan, a technology consulting firm that specializes in providing Salesforce integration solutions and digital transformation services for nonprofits and associations. With over a decade of experience in building strategic partnerships and driving business growth, Zach plays a key role in expanding FusionSpan's impact through innovative solutions and leveraging AI-driven technologies. He's helped organizations streamline their operations and enhance their member experiences through tailored tech ecosystems and cutting-edge Salesforce tools, which is why we're excited to have him on the show. Zach, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
The pleasure's mine. I'm really excited to get into some of the work that you're doing here with Fusion Span. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, Zach, let's start with a couple of minutes on just who you are, where you came from, and how you landed in your role.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have about a decade of experience working for a variety of different SaaS companies. Started my career in software implementation and wasn't aware of solution engineering or pre-sales as a potential career path. And one of my former coworkers became a solution engineer at DocuSign. And when she was describing the role to me, I got excited. The difference between implementation and pre-sales is vast, right? Because I would build software solutions to demo, wouldn't have to worry about permissions. It was just a lot more fun, right? So I pivoted from an implementation role to what ended up transforming my career, which was a pre-sales role, a solution engineer role at Salesforce. I spent about 5 years at Salesforce working with a couple different of the product offerings before I was caught up in the layoffs of Salesforce early 2023. And that's when a lot of people in similar types of roles were let go. My team in particular was pretty devastated by that. But of course, I ended up landing on my feet and ended up working in the Salesforce partner ecosystem. And it was different selling services instead of selling licenses. That was new to me. But fortunately, I was still able to leverage my Salesforce platform experience as well as just my generalized selling and business acumen in this type of role. And most recently, I joined FusionSpan about 3 months ago, where I moved from a large technical powerhouse firm to a smaller boutique firm. We have about 130 employees across the world, but our office is based in the DC area, and I'm based in Chicago. And there have been a lot of growing pains, right? Like joining any smaller organization, lack of maybe well-defined processes, a lot of tribal knowledge, and a lot of what I've been doing, in addition to what I was hired for, was really start to think about a more comprehensive long-term strategy for how we can scale a business. And it's not as clear cut when you're at a smaller organization what your roles are, right? When
Mm-hmm.
you're at an organization like Salesforce, you have very specific lanes, right? You have 8 different people selling to the same customer because they all have different specialties. You have AEs, you have SEs, and now account executives and solution engineers. And now it's a lot more blurred, which I'm appreciative of. It's an opportunity for me to grow and develop and really make an impact, but it's also very challenging.
Yeah, that kind of coming from a very well-defined role into one that's a little bit more ambiguous or in the ether, as it were, it makes it a little bit more difficult to know what you should or shouldn't be doing. However, it creates this other opportunity to learn and explore some of the other potentialities that exist within what your role could be defined as. And so, I'd love to get more from you on what it's like right now, kind of defining that for yourself in the company.
Yeah, I mean, as a director of alliances, I would say the biggest part of my role that I was hired for is leveraging the channel, which would be specifically the Salesforce channel. And how do we partner with Salesforce's sellers? How do we get involved in deals at the right time? And then how do we become the implementer of choice? So when these customers buy technology, Fusion Span comes to be top of mind for providing the services and the implementation. And that's largely what I'm focusing on, right? But one of the examples of something outside of my role that I'm taking on is if you were to ask if you were to ask 5 different people at Fusion Span what Fusion Span's differentiators are, you'll get 5 similar but vaguely different answers. And I think it's important that any organization you have cohesive strategic messaging about what your value differentiators are. And I'll say I'm not necessarily a trained marketer or a trained change management person, but I've been in successful sales organizations for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to kind of leverage some of the experience I've acquired over the years or gleaned from other effective sales organizations and put together this corporate messaging deck, which is ultimately going to be a certification that every new hire and existing hire is going to go through to make sure that we have that cohesive company-wide messaging. And although resources are already kind of strapped, I do believe that anybody externally facing can also be a seller, right? Like if you're in delivery and providing services, you should always be listening for upsell opportunities. How can clients expand their technology footprint? How can they ultimately expand their spend with Fusion Span and purchase more hours or services?
Yeah, there's that's a really interesting perspective, and I'm going to use a completely different industry as an example, I think, to kind of illustrate what it is I believe you're kind of pointing at here, which is like, okay, we have a restaurant, and the restaurant's job is to sell plates and glasses full of liquor, and then increase the tab from the table. Well, the signage, I mean, in the building can only do so much. You put up a sign, say this is what's on special, you give them a menu, they look at it, they pick what they want. But then the server has this opportunity whenever they visit the table to ask questions, be curious, explore what the experience of the people sitting at the table, what their desired experience is, so that they can make suggestions as to how to amplify their current experience, right? So it's like, oh hey, you want this very specific dish. Well, you need this very specific wine that goes with that very specific dish, and so you create these opportunities. So it's like, as somebody who's doing fulfillment or a front-facing employee, part of their role might be now to be curious, ask questions, find out more about what these clients' needs are, and then basically install or create these feedback loops so that you can develop products or that you can potentially offer things that are already inside of your wheelhouse to grow the business. Is that kind of like what you're talking about?
That's exactly it. And you can think of us kind of like a technology curator, right? Where
Okay.
what's great is I don't work for Salesforce anymore. And there are a lot of ancillary solutions that do pieces of what Salesforce does.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm able to work with our sales teams to put together a comprehensive technology strategy, whether there are edge use cases around like event management or marketing or um, what else comes to mind? Like feedback, surveys, anything like that. Like there's a lot of supplementary solutions out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the role of really anybody working with the clients, new or existing, to listen to potential expanded use cases outside of what the customer is asking for.
Right. Okay. So this sounds like an experience thing. And uh, follow me on this as I kind of unpack it. A jack of all trades is a master of none. but oftentimes better than a master of one. And to me, what that translates to is there is a certain type of person that likes to have that kind of 30,000 foot view of like, oh, these are all of the tools. And you might not know how to use them all like perfectly well, but here's all of the potential things that exist out there. And then a client comes in, they're using Salesforce or they want to use Salesforce, but Salesforce has some limitations. And so you have the perspective of this vantage point of knowing all of the other things that exist out there that you can also bring in to supplement what Salesforce can do. So now you can serve that client at a higher degree. Um, and so does that mean then that part of the challenge is how do you get everybody else to have that same perspective? How do you like bring everybody up to the top of the mountain to go, look, this is everything that's out there that we can do, and then bring them back down so now we can serve? Is that kind of the challenge you're facing?
That's exactly what I'm facing because I'm one person
Hmm.
managing several different channels or partnerships or relationships. And on top of the like go to market messaging that I'm creating, there's the sales messaging too.
Right.
And it's how do we it's a change management thing where how do we bring 100 people up to speed? Um, and we're figuring it out, right?
Hmm.
But there's it's a process.
Right, right. So what's your approach then to because this is like a multifaceted challenge, right? Because there's on one front, there is the existing team, the people that you work with, that you're kind of helping and guiding and leading them towards the light, as it were. But then there's also the clients. There's the people that you're serving who, um, they are also missing information that you have, and so this becomes that sort of you don't know what you don't know. And so now you gotta like get people to know the things that they don't know, and that takes a particular set of skills. And so I'm curious, what sorts of strategies are you deploying to kind of address that?
Yeah. So I this role that I'm currently working in is very multifaceted where I think of myself as kind of a coordinator or facilitator of different conversations.
Hmm.
And our messaging to our clients, for example, is going to differ from our internal messaging or even from our messaging within the Salesforce channel or other partnerships. So I work with our marketing leader to kind of craft our messaging towards the external, towards the clients, right? And then I'm the owner of our messaging towards our partnerships. And then internal, I work with other leaders to refine the messaging based on the audience. So everybody cares about slightly different things, right? Because their goals are different, their responsibilities are different. And it's it's constantly a work in progress, right? And I still think of even when I write an email, I took a business writing class when I was like 19 in college, and that was the only business class I took because I majored in biology. But he really ingrained that professor really ingrained it in my head. It's like, so what? Who cares? And people
Mm.
are ultimately thinking about like what's in it for them, what's in it for their organization. And it's important to craft that throughout all of our messaging, depending on the audience.
I think that's incredibly powerful. So what? Who cares? So a friend of
It's
mine,
simple, it's blunt, but it's effective.
well, it's I'll call it radically honest, right? And that's something that some people have a difficulty understanding. My A friend of mine told me it in a different way. Nobody cares about what you're talking about as much as you do. And that
Yes,
put it all into perspective. Like, oh, I get it. So the challenge is not me sharing the information. The challenge is me getting the buy-in, getting the enrollment, getting people to believe the thing themselves. And so that poses its own set of challenges and things that you have to do to, or tasks, I guess, to get people there, right? So this is
right,
back to the server example. The task is you got to increase the bill. Well, how do you do that? Well, you're not going to increase the bill by being like, go buy more wine.
right,
You do it by asking like, hey, do you like white wine or red wine? Oh, you like white wine? Do you prefer it to be sparkling or do you want it to be a little bit more fruity? Or, so now you explore potentialities with somebody versus, telling them how it is. And so to your point, um, So what? Who cares? So the messaging
Yes,
now is, you pointed this at this earlier too. The messaging becomes really important in how you're communicating things, how you're framing things. So talk to me a little bit about that. What sort of strategies are you deploying in terms of helping kind of share some of that information with the world, and being a little bit more intentional with the branding, and being more cohesive?
I will say I'm learning a lot, and Salesforce is a great organization to learn how to be good at a job. Like that's
Mm,
where I really began my sales career.
yeah.
And I still think of these day-long workshops they used to have with their customers called hero workshops, where they basically draft their entire customer journey of their customer. So the customer's journey.
Wow,
And
that's super
they
meta.
tell this they tell this whole storyline about the customer's journey, and then they end up making that customer like the hero of the story, which is why it's the hero workshop.
Mm,
So I've taken that into our company messaging, especially our customer messaging, and I'm starting to think about like we don't want to talk about obviously we're going to have to talk a little bit about fusion span, but to your point, like so what, or to my point, so what, who cares? It's like the clients are going to want to hear how fusion span is going to make their lives easier. How is it going to improve how their organization operates?
mm.
How are key metrics that their managers care about, how are they going to be improved? And it's changing the lens of what I'm talking about, again, tailored to the audience. And then to your point, really, like nobody wants to hear a 20-minute slide about your company overview or a 20-minute presentation about your company overview. You have to fly through that in a few minutes, do so effectively, and quickly get to the meat and potatoes of the presentation, where it's actually things that clients are going to care about.
You're reminding me of this book I read recently. Shout out our CEO Brandon, who kind of put me on game here. It's called The 3 Minute Rule, written by Brant Pinvidic. It's a hard
Okay.
name. I think it's a Polish name. It's a hard name to pronounce. But essentially, what's in this book is, so this guy spent his whole life pitching movies to production companies to get deals, and did so very successfully. I can't remember which movies he was a part of pitching, and they became a success, and he's a huge deal on that front. But the idea here is to take and distill down your message into something that's under 3 minutes that covers all of the bases. Um, it starts with what the big problem is, and this is it. What, so what? Who cares? Well, you care because this is your problem.
Right.
And if you see that this is the problem, and we're in alignment on that, then everything that follows you're already enrolled in. You've already bought into this idea of, okay, yeah, you do know my problem. So if you know my problem, you must have gone down this path somewhere, or you must understand this route. And so what path did you take to get us out of here? And how can I take that path too? So as soon as you get that enrollment rate, like initially on, okay, here's the problem. Yeah, that's me. I have that problem. I want to fix that problem. Well, now you can walk them through their journey of, because, and I love this narrative, this storytelling, and how you kind of connect that to the brand, and how the brand is going to, you know, help them become the heroes of their own story. So as you kind of roll out some of these strategies, the you got to get the buy-in from everybody that's on the team. You got to get everybody involved in it to help them shape that direction, so that when they are interacting or interfacing with the clients or prospects or people who are curious, everybody's on the same page with that. And I imagine that that has been and will continue to be a bit of a challenge. What are you doing to kind of help everybody get on board with that?
So I have always, I think very specifically about a manager I had when I first started at Salesforce in about 2018. And I try to replicate his management style. And
Mhm.
it starts as like show somebody how how you would handle a situation, show somebody how you would facilitate a call, and then maybe co-lead a call with somebody, and then lead the call, or then let the person you're mentoring lead the next call and provide feedback and coaching opportunities. And really just leaving myself available as support after that, once they feel comfortable. And I think it instills this inherent trust where it's like, I trust that these calls will be run effectively. Obviously, things can come up, I get it, but always making myself available to support. And I think how things operate now is going to be different than how things operate in a year.
Mm.
Because as one person, I I'm in a pipe generation role. Like, realistically, my role should mostly be focusing on generating pipeline, not necessarily on closing deals or supporting deals. And I'm more than happy to support these expanded functions when I'm able to or when I'm required to, but it's not necessarily going to scale because I'm one person with a lot of different competing objectives.
Yeah, and then that kind of points at um, the pipeline generation, and there's a challenge in the industry to connect the marketing to the sales, to the people who are actually having the conversations, because you can only do so much to get people to be like curious and want to learn more or get involved, right? And so as a kind of customer experience journey um for you and for Fusion Span, it's like, hey, here's something that might be interesting to you, kind of tells that narrative, gets you connected to it. They come into your world. Now you're having those conversations. If the sales team doesn't know how they got here, they're going to be missing some key parts to that too. Is that kind of part of what you're pointing at?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It all ties down or ties back to that cohesive messaging where our organization should present as one and not as several individual sellers. Right.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And everybody has their own take on presentation style, their messaging, the little stories that they pepper in to tell a compelling sales pitch, right? But overall, the messaging should be relatively the same.
Right. Yeah. So when it comes to some of the big goals that you're aiming at, what's on the horizon? What's coming down the pipeline? What sorts of new strategies are you testing out and deploying to kind of reach those goals?
Yeah, so it's funny being at Salesforce a year and a half ago. I'm also the champion of evaluating an internal Salesforce tool for advanced analytics. So it's interesting being on the receiving end of Salesforce's sales pitches. Um, I was on a demo last week with the demo was being led by one of their solution engineers, and I was asking questions that I knew would be tough. I felt bad for the guy, but also I needed the answers to the questions.
Yeah.
So it's interesting being in a buyer role. But that said, like, this advanced analytics tool and something, it's CRM analytics, but our organization hasn't. We have all the data that we need to within our CRM or within other systems, but I'm not necessarily able to easily pull that data and either show my success or show where support's lacking and where we need to invest more resources. And that's something that is relatively new to the organization too, is really telling, outside of like closed revenue or the metrics that you would expect us to report on, which we do, but it's identifying other key metrics to really show where the business is going and where we need to invest.
Mm.
And I think that's part of my longer term strategy is the data quality is there, but how do we act on that? How do we go to our CEO and show what we need, or show what we're doing well, or show successes, right? And it's telling that story with data, which is really a long-term priority of mine, but something I'm focusing on now. And one of the other things that I am continuously working on is keeping up to speed with the ever changing technology landscape. I was at Dreamforce, which is a huge Salesforce conference in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about Agentforce. And Agentforce is the big product that Salesforce is pushing, and it's being marketed as autonomous bots, autonomous agents. So it's taking chatbots a step further, where it's not just facilitating a conversation, but it can interact with Salesforce's customer data and take action. So let's say my computer's broken and I can chat with Apple. They do identity verification, which isn't new. This is all part of a chatbot, but they do identity verification. They can look up my Mac's identifier number, and then they can see if it's under warranty. And if it's under warranty, then they can potentially send a replacement without having an agent if that's how autonomous they decide to have the bot be.
Right.
And that's just one example of the innovation happening at Salesforce. So that as a partner, we are getting interested clients in this technology, but there hasn't necessarily been an enablement for partners. So we're constantly trying to keep up with the innovation of this huge organization, because ultimately the partner ecosystem that's going to be the ones who build it for clients.
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack. So to start with, it's one thing to create the feedback loops and get the information that you need, but then what do you do with that data? What information is important? How are you measuring it? Have you established a baseline? All these other things now come into play. And then to add fuel to the fire here, there is an ongoing evolution of the technologies that are available or at your disposal. So there's a this threat of becoming obsolete if you're not like staying up to date with everything that's happening, so that when you're making suggestions to your clients, that you're making beneficial ones that are going to be longer lasting, or have some level of like cutting edge innovation kind of baked into it. So what do you suggest others measure in their metrics, aside from the ones that you kind of pointed at, customer acquisition cost and lifetime value and things like that? What other metrics are important to you in the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So I am largely focusing on, like I said, the channel. And for us, if you think about Salesforce, their sales hierarchy is typically a team of AEs led by maybe an RVP, a regional vice president, led by an AVP as you get to upper management. And I would love to be able to see, okay, here is AVP John Doe. And I could pull up a report looking at John Doe, see all of the sales reps that roll up to John Doe, see all of the accounts, all of the opportunities, and all of the revenue that rolls up to John Doe. So then I can go to John and say, look at all this great work we've been doing. Because as you start to get higher up the management chain at Salesforce and really anywhere, time becomes more and more valuable.
Mm,
So they're much more willing to give me time after I've already demonstrated success. Instead of saying like, oh, this is what I have planned, it would be like, oh, that's a great idea, but like, come to me when it's done, right?
right. Yeah.
So that's an example of some data I'm trying to pull. And yeah, I think there's a lot of data points that we can extract just from our implementation lifecycle. Like, when's a good time historically for us to check in during or after an implementation to do health checks or to identify opportunities for managed services or other additional sales after an implementation's been complete.
So this is more like customer touch points, staying in contact, and I guess that's even more development of the feedback loops and maintaining trajectory with your goals and successes. Really powerful, man. Um, This has been great. I wonder if, as we kind of come to a close of our time together here, we can look at some of the bigger goals that are on the horizon. What's the North Star here?
I want to help build Fusion Span's brand as the association partner. And I think it's important to do like a lot of partners, a lot of people in the ecosystem, they do a lot of different things. And then maybe they're like third or fourth that come to mind for each of those things. And I'm trying to build this presence where if anybody thinks about a association Salesforce implementation, they think of Fusion Span, which is a very niche market, but I think it's I think it's essential that like we do it well, right?
Right.
And it's great having a clear cut customer base, right? Like we want to work with nonprofits and associations, which gives us a relatively attainable subset of the market. And my long-term goal is just to bring Fusion Span to be top of mind. So both from a brand perspective, but then also from a services or from a technology perspective and how we're innovating.
That's really exciting. A lot of potential there, and to become synonymous with Salesforce as the leading partner in scaling and creating value there. I think that's really powerful. If we could just to close this out here, I imagine somebody who's out there up to it, maybe in a similar position to you, facing some challenges. What sort of advice might you offer them to help them to keep pushing and achieve some level of success?
Yeah, I mean, I will say like try to leverage your network however you can. I think I have been fortunate enough to build great relationships along my professional career, both people that work for technology companies, but then also people that work for services companies. And maintaining healthy working relationships allows for me to be able to reach out to these people and ask for help. And even if it's just a brainstorming session, or asking somebody to kind of make sure that do a sanity check about
Mm.
like the direction that I'm going in. Like it's always helpful to have a sounding board, and those people don't always have to be within your organization. And that I do believe that by cultivating these relationships, like they will also feel comfortable asking me for help at some point too.
You reminded me of an old cliche saying, "Your net worth is in your network."
Like, yeah, yeah,
Love that, man. This has been great. You've been so generous with your time and your wisdom, Zach, and I'm very grateful for that. To close things out here, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain or perhaps work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
yeah. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Zachary Zachary McClernon, McClernon, or email. My email address is my first initial last name at fusionspan.com.
Perfect. We'll make sure to link to all that in the show notes so anybody watching or listening will be able to get in touch with you easily. On that note, if you wanted to reach out to me and my team for any of your marketing or AI needs, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining me for this conversation, and I will see you in the next.